Hello and welcome to another episode of Unique Professions. Today we are going to look at first contact and explore what that is, and UFO researching. Today my guest is Eesha Patel. Eesha, how are you?
I'm fabulous. Thank you so much for having me here.
Eesha, how did you start this line of work? What first got you into the world of UFO researching?
That's a great question, especially because I don't think anyone ever wakes up one day and says, oh, you know what? I want to research UFOs for a living. So there definitely was a defining moment that kickstarted all of this. And it was in 2015 when I was going through a really big sort of transition in life. I'd come out of a relationship, and it was around that time that I also experienced a big spiritual awakening. So I started to question the world around me, and also, was meditating, and a result of those things coming together, I discovered that I had this innate ability to be a medium or a channel. And so my channeling abilities kicked in during that time. And that's what sort of kickstarted the journey of going down this pathway of galactic consciousness.
And it's interesting that you're a medium, or you said you've got medium abilities. Because I was thinking then, what kind of made you go into the galactic space rather than, some mediums more into the spiritual, talking to other people, talking to past people who have died? What made you go into this sort of sphere?
Yeah, that's another really great question. So there's a lot of different realms that can be accessed when you awaken those spiritual abilities. And the very first group of beings that I connected were actually more angelic. So I had angelic beings come through. I can connect with spirits on the other side, like, for example, deceased people. And sometimes when I'm working with my clients, that sort of energy might come through. But I've always had a personal fascination with the galactic side of things. And I think it also goes back to those early moments in 2015, because one of the groups that I channeled very early on was the Arcturian Council of Light. And so when they came through and shared some of their wisdom and knowledge with me, I guess I developed a bit of an affinity for them. And then sort of exploring that a bit further, I realized that I have a strong soul connection with that group as well. So it kind of comes down to a combination of personal preference, but also it's where my affinity lies, because that's the group that I feel most connected with.
And with that wisdom that you were given, what was the wisdom that you connected with the most?
The earlier information I received was more around spiritual healing. So how we can heal ourselves, how we can be responsible for our own healing, and then sort of integrating that with modern medicine as well. I really think it's important to put the two practices together, but I find that there's a missing piece in modern medicine, which is they don't always look holistically at the bigger picture of what's going on. And what the Arcturians shared with me was some really valuable pieces around the mindset and philosophy around how we view people. To give you a really basic example of that, if somebody walks into a doctor's office and they say something is wrong with them, usually what happens is the doctor will reaffirm that and believe them. Now, of course, there's a validation aspect. You've got to validate if someone's having an experience, but sometimes what they miss is they miss the potential for the wholeness. And the body has this amazing ability to heal itself. We have this awesome field now that's relatively new, but it's called epigenetics, and they talk about this ability to almost train the genomes and the genetic capacity within you to interact in a certain way and to respond in a certain way. And so back in the day, people used to think that everything was just, that you just, if you have an illness, that's it. You just put up with it. Some things are going to be incurable. And then later, as the research evolved, we discovered that, well, actually some things can change and not everything is incurable. There's lots of things that, through like mindset, meditation, holistic practices, along with the physical things as well, like diet and maybe exercise and those things, the body is actually really capable of healing. So the Arcturians shared with me that the number one thing that we should be doing in the healing field is we should first see somebody's potential for being whole, and to see that wholeness and to see through their current stories or through their current experience into the version of them where the healing has already happened. And that's the frame that allows then that potential to be more likely to be in their current experience.
That's very good. Now, when you slowly discovered your ability, what was your first reaction or your first insight?
There's nothing slow about my journey, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was pretty sudden, like overnight almost. But I think, one of the first things I learned was that there are these beings out there, like what we call now non-human intelligences, I think is a commonly accepted term. So these non-human intelligences exist, and it's like we're just not taught about it in school. Nobody gets taught because it's beyond the five physical senses. So when I discovered that I can connect with angels and I can connect with galactic beings and I can connect with your spirits and other things, it really opened up my mind to this idea that maybe everything I learned in school wasn't the complete picture of what's really possible.
And what have you learnt from those contacts?
All sorts of things. I mean, other than the fact that they exist, which is mind-blowing in and of itself, it's been a journey of really extracting the wisdom from that. And different beings have different types of wisdom that they're more likely to share with you. Now, the Arcturians are a classic example of that. I know them to be the master healers in the universe because their civilization, I mean, they've eradicated cancer. They've really advanced when it comes to technologies, and they don't experience the same physical ailments that we do. And so to some degree, they've been able to almost eliminate forms of physical suffering. So by that regard, they can live longer. They have also established a more harmonious society. So there's lots of things that they're doing differently. Now, the angelic realms, my conversations with the angels are a little bit more about love and peace and a bit more what's the way, it's their conversations are more about presence and just being mindful of the self, like that kind of thing. So really depending on who I'm connecting with, the nature of the conversation will be quite different.
And you said there about that this isn't being taught in schools, and it's not really seen on in media and all those sort of things. Do you think there's a fear of the unknown as well from that sort of realm?
I think there is absolutely a fear of the unknown, but also I think there have been certain agendas in place to keep humanity disconnected from that. And you only have to ask the question of who benefits from that, and that'll lead you down some rabbit holes in and of itself. So I think it's a combination of like the systems that don't want people to awaken to this, and then once that disconnect happens, then it's the fear of the unknown that kicks in, because if you don't remember and then it suddenly feels scary and unknown, there's not a lot of incentive for people to go and seek that. But there was a time where all of this knowledge was known. So you go back to ancient traditions, you go back to a lot of indigenous cultures, they talk about this stuff all the time. Even the Australian indigenous people will tell you about the stories of the stars and the Pleiadians. So I think it's lost knowledge, and I think at the moment we're so busy just wrapped up in our day-to-day stuff that not everyone has the incentive to go and seek for that stuff that's been hidden from us.
Now, are there any beings that are not positive, but trying to deharmonise, or is there any beings that aren't as good for us?
Well, I mean, it's exactly the same as like what we have on Earth. There are plenty of really great people here on Earth, and then there are a few people that maybe are still learning different lessons and they're still evolving in different ways. And so the way that we evolve as humans, and we have such a diversity of evolution here, even just on Earth, the same translates to other realms as well. So there are lots of souls having these different experiences who are at different stages of evolution, and there are some galactic races that have reached a higher level of harmony and others that haven't quite got to that stage of unified field consciousness yet. And so I don't like to use the words good and bad because it's a spectrum of evolution, but there's definitely a wide spectrum in that sense.
Is there a hierarchy in the galactic world?
The sense of hierarchy, again, it comes more from levels of evolution. So, like here on Earth, we experience hierarchy, for example, through governance systems or within organizations. Different societies and different galactic races will have different ways that they experience hierarchy. Some are more closer to what we have on Earth, where there's a hierarchy and it's almost authoritarian, like you have to follow the hierarchy. And then there are some races who have managed to find a different level of harmony in that, where there is a hierarchy, but it's more of like a guidance council. And so it's not really like, they're the hierarchy and they tell everyone what to do. It's more just like there's a council of people appointed to oversee, and if there is something that is questionable or maybe could be potentially in conflict, they would seek guidance from the council, and then they trust that council's advisory.
Okay. Now, is in the galactic world or in the galactic beings, how has your contact evolved? Like, obviously it's evolved, from where you started with. So what kind of conversations were you having and are you having now?
My very first initial conversations were really just focused on myself. And that was because I was at a point at my stage in life where I was going through a lot of big changes. And so it was more just me seeking guidance about what am I doing with my life and where am I going and what do I do next. And how that's evolved is once I kind of got my ducks in a row, it was more looking at the planetary vision of things. So now the conversation and the vision is around intergalactic, open, peaceful contact. And that's a much bigger frame of vision to have because it's no longer just about me. It's about how do we lead the human race to reconnect with our galactic family and to remember those roots that we come from.
And how have you started that journey? I'm not sure it's a very long journey. It's one that's going to evolve, change, and do it. But how have you started that process, and what do you still need to do?
Well, I think, the easiest way to describe it in a frame that people would understand would be to go back and look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yep.
right? So at the basic level, we have these base needs, psychological needs and physiological needs. And once you sort of go through all of that and, you've got a roof over your head, you've got food on the table, you're doing, reasonable financially, you've got a good community around you, a sense of belonging. Once you work your way up through those levels, the top of that is self-actualization. And there's an evolutionary process that I think we're going through right now on planet Earth where people are moving through those layers. There's still quite a lot of diversity. We still experience poverty on the planet, but there are some people who are very capable now who have the material wealth, who've experienced, the earthly side of things and the fleshy desires, and they've moved through that to now be able to go, okay, I'm now going to put my vision on self-actualization. And the more people that transcend through those layers, they can then go back and help the people at the bottom layers who maybe are, not able to get food. And that's where the concept of charity comes in. The ones who can and the ones who are able to should absolutely be giving back to their community a percentage so that we can be evolving. And that could be monetary help. It could be education. It could be, the way that I've chosen to do it is dedicate my life to educating people. So I put a lot of time and energy into doing that. And that's my mission on planet Earth. But there's lots of ways that we can contribute. So it comes down to, once you get yourself sorted, how can you give back to the community and how can you then help others evolve as well so that we can all then rise up together as a human race?
And I've noticed that when on your website you were talking about there are different places where you can travel to, and there are only certain places that you can travel to experience this. What are they and why are those specific places?
Yeah, so some places, okay, first of all, I want to say you can experience galactic contact anywhere. You don't have to be in a particular location for that, and I really want to stress that point. But there are some places on planet Earth where the energy is a little bit more aligned. Some of the original blueprints of the energy and the ley lines are still intact. And so these are what, some people might refer to them as sacred sites. An example of that in Australia is Uluru, where there is a strong galactic connection there. There's also places like Sedona in the United States, in Arizona. Fruška Gora in Serbia, when I visited last year, I was pleasantly surprised to find had a very high vibrational energy. But there's many of these places around the planet. Mount Shasta, California is another one. Lots and lots of places. Here in Perth, even just within Perth, there are different energetic grids and structures, and there are some places in Perth where you get more star activity than others. For example, in the Perth Hills, around Darlington, Chittering, I've had a lot of activity there. But then I even still see starships in my own backyard. So, the place can help, but it's also to do with the consciousness and the vibration that you're putting out as well in order to have these contact experiences.
And with the vibrations, how do you feel the difference of each one? How do you feel, because you said that some are stronger than others, how do you feel, what is actually happening to you when you feel that?
When I visit these places of these, higher vibrations, there are different ways that I can perceive that. I am quite visual through my third eye. So sometimes I will go to a location and I might see the energy of the land. I might see like there's a beautiful golden energy. Or sometimes, like for example, what I experienced in Serbia was very powerful. When I first arrived that night, we got in like midnight that night because of the crazy traffic in Europe. So yeah, we arrived at midnight, and then I was just receiving these visions all night long about just the energy of the land and the spirits of the land that wanted to connect with me. I had another similar experience when I went to Dublin in Ireland, and I just kept seeing these green emerald energy that was coming to me in my sleep state when I arrived. So sometimes it's like the energy of the land will want to connect with me, and sometimes it'll also be the spirits and the beings of the land that want to make themselves known to me as well. And when that happens, I know that the place still has its original energies available. Because when I go to places where that energy doesn't exist, it's like I feel like it feels draining. Like some places feel more draining, like it's exhausting to be there, whereas the places that are more high vibrational, I go there and I feel really recharged. I feel more connected to my spiritual self. So that's usually how I can tell the difference.
And one of the places that you just mentioned there, Uluru, Ayers Rock, as they call, that has a very spiritual with indigenous culture as well. That particular place is very highly respected in their culture, and they have lots of spirits that go through there. Do the Galactic and those spirits come together in places like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, places like Uluru, you definitely get a wide spectrum of energies that will connect from everything from elemental to galactic to, even just spirits in the spirit realm who want to communicate. But Uluru in particular, I think is it's a really powerful place. But it's also been there's a lot of different people who are trying to tap into that energy with different intentions. And so I've been to Uluru a few times. I'm actually going back there this solstice for the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, which I'm speaking at. And so at the conference, we bring together a lot of different people, and there is quite a galactic focus on this one, but there's also a wide variety of energies that we connect with. So I think at the end of the day, when it comes to sacred sites, it's about going there and honoring and respecting the energy that the land presents and just being available to really receive that. Not so much to change that. That's probably one thing that I would say is, and that I've learned over the years is don't try and change it too much unless you get very specifically told to by your galactic team. But really just go there and receive and feel what's available, because sacred sites, it's like plugging into the remembering of the source or the remembering of our ancestry. And Uluru is a really beautiful place for that. So, yeah, I'm really excited to go there in December for the event and be amongst the tribe again.
And now, you've had a lot of our clients, that have utilised this. Utilised the service. Can you tell me your first client and how that evolved and how that came across?
I can very much tell you my very first client. I've told this story a few times because the way that it happened was quite out of the box. Like I didn't really have a service. I wasn't really trained in any of this work. I just knew that I had this connection to this channeling that I was doing, this gift that I just awakened. Anyway, some person found me on Facebook. I don't know how they found me. They sent me a DM and they basically said, look, I'm struggling with this and this. Can you help me? And I just had this internal guidance just to say yes. And I'd never done it before. And he was willing to pay me. And he basically said to me, look, I'll pay you $300 to do this one-off session on me. Yep. He came, we did the session. It was amazing. And he paid me $300,
Yeah.
So I feel like the universe was just telling me, like, this is what you're supposed to do. Because, I always have this sense that when something is aligned for you, that it will show up easily and effortlessly and you'll be guided to do that, And the way that this just landed into my lap and he was willing to pay me, which I probably would have done it anyway, but I think the universe was saying, like, make this your career, make this a pathway that you can do in the long term. So I just followed that. So that was my first client. And then I started running these ceremonies based on the galactic wisdom I received from the Arcturians. And that then kick-started what became a studio that I had in Perth, my business, and it sort of snowballed from there.
And you've got a team behind you as well now, don't you?
I do, yeah. I've got a bit of a team, which I think you need at this point because I need it. And they're lovely. They help me to do all the back end stuff because I'm not very tech savvy and all of those things. So I get them to do my websites and just manage stuff for me, which is really great.
Now, I'm just wondering, when you've got such an interesting insight into the realm. Do you have people who come to you and might be very skeptic of your work, and how do you deal with that?
Look, you get the occasional skeptical person, but I mean, to be honest, there's too many believers out there that I just don't really have the time to deal with the skeptics. I mean, look, once you know, you know. Like, I, at some point in my life, would also have been a skeptic, right? It wasn't until I experienced it myself that I had to change my entire perception. And that's, that's coming from someone from a very scientific background. I studied engineering as my first degree. So I came from a very heavily scientific background, studied engineering, electrical engineering at that. So, I came from this background where it was all about the science, the maths, the physics, and the chemistry, and like all of that sort of stuff. And then I experienced channeling, and well, nobody taught me that in all my years of schooling, so I had to open my mind, and I guess I'm grateful that I did. So now, if someone is skeptical, I just think, well, they might get it one day. Like, it's not for everyone, but once you get it, you really can't deny the facts of what's happened. So, yeah.
And when you first channeled, what was that experience for you? When you first channeling the spirit, what was your body saying? What were you thinking? What were you feeling?
I just remember laying in bed, and then this voice came through me, and it was speaking really, really fast. But this is the part where I knew it wasn't me, because I couldn't even understand what was being said. Like, It was like my consciousness was off to the side and something else was coming through, and it wasn't me. And, I later on learned who the beings are and, sort of had the clarity around that. But at the time that it first happened, it was just like, it was a really strange experience because I thought I was going crazy. I mean, I've always been taught that this is me, this is my head, my thoughts are my own, and suddenly there's this like foreign thing, and it's saying things that I would never say in sentence structures that I would never use. So like, where does it come from? So, yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting experience because it was like I was in my body, but then I wasn't the only energy in there. I don't do that type of channeling anymore, though, and that's a whole different story in itself because I've learnt that there are now healthier ways to communicate with non-human intelligences that don't involve them coming into your body. And I think there's a sovereignty that we have to sort of maintain in the human body, and so I don't allow that kind of channeling to happen anymore because I've learnt now how to communicate with them in other ways.
All right. Well, you led me to a question there. How did you change that process for you?
So about a year after I discovered that I had this ability to channel, which happened completely accidentally for me, I learned a process called the inner heart meditation where I learned how to access my multidimensional self. And so the inner heart, the best way to describe that, it's like this universal language of consciousness. And there's a very specific framework that when you know how to use this framework, you can communicate with any being in the universe just like you and I are having a conversation. It's actually wild because, again, we're not taught this in school, but every other being in the universe knows about this concept. So it's like learning the language that everyone else knows and then being able to communicate in that universal language. And it's not necessarily a language like words, it's more like a visual type thing. So you visualize this inner heart space, and there's quite a few structures in that I don't have time to go through right now. But once you learn it, you can go into that space, and then the being that you want to connect with also understands the same language and can meet you in there, which is very cool.
Now, I'm interested about your training, because I imagine, I'm just going, perhaps when you first start out, there wasn't much about this. You're probably more a bit of a trailblazer in that sense. So how did you acquire the knowledge?
Well, I mean, going back to almost 13 years ago now, so this was actually before my first channeling experience. I was practicing this meditation, which I learned from my spiritual mentor, which it's called the Merkaba light body activation. And so you sit in this space and you visualize this Merkaba light body. And after I had been taught that practice, I practiced it quite consistently. And one of the experiences I had as a result of doing that regularly was I had this sort of experience of oneness where my body completely dissolved and I was in the everythingness or the nothingness or whatever you want to call that. It was just like there was no boundary between me and the rest of the universe. And it was when I was sitting in that experience that I had this voice come through me, and it said, "You're in the 13th dimension." And I was just like, what is the 13th dimension? So I tried to go to Google, but of course there was nothing there. And so when you talk about the trailblazing, I really had to figure a lot of stuff out for myself, which was sitting in meditation every single day, exploring my consciousness. And when the channeling thing started, a lot of my knowledge and wisdom then came from the galactic beings, especially when it came to healing, sacred geometries, all that sort of stuff. It wasn't stuff that I learned on Google. It was stuff that I learned from the beings themselves, because they became my guides and they became my mentors, rather than, like reading out a book or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what did your mentors, your beings, teach you initially? What were some of the takeaways that you learned initially that you still think today that are really helpful in the human world?
Yeah, so the first one was how to activate my Merkaba light body, and that's what got me open enough to be able to connect with the beings in the first place. And the second most pivotal thing was learning how to access my inner heart. So these two mentors were very pivotal to me, and they taught me the techniques, because once I learned the technique, I was then able to run with it. And then it's almost like I graduated the need to have a human spiritual mentor, because once I had the technique to access my guides, I was able to then get the knowledge directly from them. So I think, in the process of evolution, if you don't know how to connect to your spirit guides, it's good to have a process or a technique to teach you that, knowing that the end goal, and this is what I say to all my students, is I say to them, I don't want me to be their mentor forever. I just want to mentor them until they can get to the point where they can then lean on their guides. And then once they have their own guides and their own connection, then, the world is your oyster. Then you can go and communicate and connect with anyone that you want.
And with your students that you teach, what are some of the key aspects when they first start? I know you said you don't want to be their mentor for a long time, but what's the main thing that you start when you teach them how to get the spirits within them? How do you channel them?
There's really three things that we work on. So one is I teach them the actual process. That's important. It's like having the actual tool in your tool belt so that you can use it. So I teach them the process, and there are levels of complexity in the process where you kind of learn different layers and layers, and that might take maybe a year or so to understand all the different tools that there are. But more important than that is I spend a lot of time teaching people to be confident and trusting the messages that they receive. Because once they use the tools, like for example, if I teach a student how to go into their inner heart, they can go in there and they can meet their spirit guide. But then what happens is they go, well, is it my spirit guide? How do I know? And they start questioning and doubting. So then we spend a bit of time going through the confidence piece and the trust piece to help them remove the self-doubt. And then sort of in alignment with that is the clearing process. So we do quite a bit of work around clearing the chakras, clearing the energy field. So the combination of the clearing and the confidence and then the actual processes, when you put all of that together, that equips them with everything they need to then go out, receive the guidance themselves and trust it, and then be able to take action on that as well.
And with the students that you teach, I know every student's different, and everyone's got different reasons but let's just go for, basically, why do the students come to you? What are some of the main reasons? Why do the students go, hey, or how do the students come to you? Why?
I have really crazy stories about why students come to me. Literally, some of my students will see me or hear my name or something in a dream, and then they'll call me and they'll sign up to work with me. I've had that happen so many times. Yeah. So it'll be like their guides are getting them to work with me, you know. So I've had that quite a few instances. But the other most common reason is that usually people get to this stage in their life where, they've done some meditation, they've, tried some bit of healing, maybe they've done a Reiki course, maybe they've done like a retreat with Dr. Joe Dispenza or something like that. But they're really looking for that next level and they're looking for that next step. And they know there's something else out there. And they see everyone else out there who's, maybe channeling or doing this work as a business and things like that. And they want to have that life for themselves. Yeah. So they'll come to me because I can help them get tapped in at a deeper level more than probably what they've already done. So it's usually the people that have maybe done some foundational work already and they're looking to get to that next level and become self-reliant in their practice as well. Like they no longer want to keep going to their healer healer. They no longer want to keep asking their Akashic Records reader about their life. They want to be able to do that themselves. And so that's when they come to me and I teach them how to do that.
And with the beings that you've talked to or seen, are there many variations of species? Like, in a normal animal world, we have, different animals, different species. Have you discovered different species?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's thousands, tens of thousands more probably different galactic races out there, and that's just in the galactic realm. I mean, when we talk about multidimensional, you've got the galactic realms, you've got the angelic realms, you've got the elemental realms. There's many, many realms. But even just in the galactic field alone, there's so many. Personally, I've connected with about 20 different races.
Yep.
So like Arcturians, Pleiadians, Andromedans, Lyrans, who else? Syrians, some Vegans. There's heaps. I have to make a list at some point because a lot of people ask me this question. I can never rattle them off on the top of my head. But about 20 different races that I personally have communicated with.
And do those races, do they teach you something different each time, or do they have differences in between them that stand out?
They'll communicate with me for varying reasons. Some of them will want to teach me something. Some of them just want to make themselves known. Some of them will come through because one of my students has a connection with them. Actually, I was doing an interview with someone recently, and he has a really strong connection with the mantis beings, but he doesn't connect with them himself so much. And so his mantis beings were tapping me on the shoulder during the time of doing the interview, and they wanted me to pass on a message to him. So sometimes they'll come through for that reason as well, because they know that I can hear them and I can sense their energies. So like, for example, I have students who have different soul groups to mine, and so if they have a really strong galactic connection with a particular group of beings, their beings will come to me to help me then connect them with that race. Yep. So lots of different reasons why they might communicate with me.
And do you find, I'm just going off topic, that when you are connecting with a being, do you find it's a certain type of day, certain days, or is it just whenever that connection is strong?
The connections happen in two different ways for the most part. One of them is when I'm sitting in meditation and I'm intentionally connecting. The other is, for example, in the scenario of doing the interview and they just tap me and say, hey, we want to talk to you. So sometimes they will just come through like at some obscure time. On the rare occasion, they will pop through in the middle of the night or something like that, which used to happen a lot more when I first started. I had to have this very polite conversation with them and say, guys, here on Earth, we have this thing called sleep, and I would like to have it.
Yeah,
so,
it is 1 a.m. I'll get back to it.
They seem to love 3 a.m. I don't know why, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, okay, guys, I would like to sleep.
Yep.
But I think they do that sometimes with people. And I'm sure anyone who's listening to this, who's going through the spiritual awakening process, it's because it's the time that our mind is most quiet and we're most receptive to it. Because otherwise we're too busy with our beliefs and things that get in the way. And so 3 o'clock in the morning is a perfect time when you have no inhibitions and they go, bam, here's our connection. And so it just comes in. So I very politely do ask for communications to happen in more daylight hours and to not disrupt my sleep, which they kindly are doing at the moment.
Excellent. That's very convenient.
Yeah. I had a lot of sleepless nights. I think the first 2 years was a lot of sleepless nights. But anyway, I'm glad I'm past that phase now.
Yeah, okay. And with those different phases, I know we're talking about sleep, but how does your phases that you've kind of gone from start to where you are now, how long have those processes evolved, and what have you learnt from each process?
Some phases will last months, some phases will last years. I mean, I've been on this journey for a while now. So, I think some people expect this stuff to happen overnight. And the reality is it simply doesn't happen overnight. I mean, actually just this morning, I was doing my inner heart meditation practice and I discovered something new that I haven't seen in 10 years. So I'm still learning, I'm still growing. I think different stages of evolution happen as and when you're ready for it. And I think it's about embracing the journey, and there's not really a destination other than self-awareness and learning more and more and more about our true capacity in the multidimensional space. So like, for example, the early phase for me, the first year was when I was doing the trance channeling, and that was a phase, right? Because I didn't know any other way. I didn't know how else to do it. And then about a year later is when I learned about the inner heart meditation practice. That phase is 10 years almost and still going strong. I don't think I'm ever going to stop that practice. But then I also went through phases where I was a bit more focused with certain soul groups as well. Like at the start, it was the Arcturians. Then more recently, it's been a lot of connection with Ashtar from the Galactic Federation. But yeah, different soul aspects and different focuses will come through depending on where I'm at personally, but also what's needed for the collective consciousness as well.
What's Ashtar teaching you at the moment?
It's not so much about teaching. My work with Ashtar at the moment, and he did teach me a lot at the start, but at the moment it's more to do with what's happening at a global level in terms of the collective evolution. So I call them missions. We go on little missions together where we'll do stuff, whether it's like clearing an energy, or sometimes if I'm at a sacred site, he'll ask me to do something. So I go on these little missions, and it's to do with either like bringing through energetic codes or clearing things, like for example clearing old blueprints, or restoring energies. It's to do with that kind of work, and a lot of it's related to the planetary grids as well. So I might get asked to go specifically to a place and work with the energies of the land there to either restore the grids or to bring through something that needs to be brought through at that time.
And when you restore the grids, or if you bring through, what are you actually bringing through? What kind of energy are you bringing through?
It really varies from place to place. And again, I'm very mindful, like places already carry their own sacred energies. So like only on very specific guidance will I go through and change that. But for example, when I was in Egypt a few years ago, a lot of my work there had to do with the restoration of the divine feminine. So I got sent to all of the masculine temples in Egypt and just anchoring that divine feminine. And it was also to do with the restoration of the Flower of Life grids at the time, because the Flower of Life dates back to about 5000 BC, or at least that's the oldest record of the Flower of Life. It's a lot older than that. But it was to do with the restoration of some of those sacred geometries and bringing through the energetic codings for the lost knowledge to be restored to humanity.
Okay. Now with with UFOs, is a big one, and some people, obviously there was the I think it was 1960 Roswell. I'm thinking of,
Roswell, 1947.
I was close, not really, but anyway, you obviously have sighted some UFOs before. Where was your first one?
My very first physical encounter was about a year into my spiritual awakening. Around the time I was just learning about this inner heart meditation, and I was sitting with my friend at her house, and she's also very connected, and so the two of us were connecting in with a specific starship called the Mary Ashar. And the Mary Ashar, we both had soul aspects that were connected to that. And so, basically we were sitting there, and she turned around to me and said, they're going to send down a beam of light. And I mean, I didn't even have time to process what she said, but then this actual beam of light came down from the sky through the ceiling into the room, and it was this really, really thick white, like a fog in her living room. And so we just sat in that for about 30 seconds. And I remember looking up and I saw her face, and it was like, she was only a couple meters away from me. She was just sitting on the other couch. But it looked like she was miles away in the distance. And I could just see like the outline of her face and then all this thick white light between us. And that was the very first physical, like really physical, tangible encounter that I had, that then kickstarted a series of other sightings that I had after that, including that night when I went out and we saw the craft in the sky and it was flashing at us. So that was a pretty cool experience.
And have you had one recently?
Oh, heaps. Just recently I was at a retreat in Chittering, and again, the Perth Hills have this beautiful galactic energy about them. So we were sitting around the fireplace and just like singing songs, having a really great vibe. And then I did this little meditation with the group where we called in these beings, and pretty much just as we were getting started in this process, my partner and I, we saw this light go across the sky. And sometimes I like to sort of check it, because it could have just been a satellite or something, right? So I said to them, in my mind, I said, look, if this is something, give us a bigger sign. Less than a minute later, and a second light appears, and it flashed, and it went across the sky, flashing like really brightly, and then it just dimmed, and then it disappeared, like completely disappeared. And so that was a really cool sighting. And then after that, we saw, I think, maybe a couple others that night as well. So it's just we call that CE5, which is like human initiated contact. It's the process of wanting to connect with the beings and initiating that contact from humans to the beings. And that's one of the ways that they'll show up, is they'll bring their craft in, they'll flash across the sky, and they'll communicate with us that way.
And what do you think that communication strategy, what do you think they're trying to tell you?
Well, in that particular instance, that craft was connected with a group of beings that my partner's very connected with at the soul level. So in addition to the physical sighting, I usually get a telepathic download as well. I'll get a sense of, well, their energy, where they're from, who they are. Sometimes I get a name or a visual of what they look like. But this particular group of beings I recognized because I'd met them before in my meditations. And so they were actually connecting with my partner, and he saw them as well. So it was, sometimes it's like a contact point. Like they want to say hello, or they want to bridge that contact. And so if I'm doing an event with my students, or with anyone, sometimes a specific group will come in for a specific person. And so that specific contact was for him. Whereas when I was in Serbia, I think last year, the year before, last year when I was in Europe, there was a craft that showed up in a photograph, which is really cool. And that one was specifically connected to the friend that I was with. And so they were trying to make contact with him. So sometimes they'll come through for a specific reason for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And for different people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some things that you during your journey, and I'm sure it is evolving and you're learning new things, what are some things that you need to learn more about, or that you're still starting to research?
My research is more around, like, it's expanding that consciousness into what else is possible. I mean, I've already met these different galactic races, but I'm sure there's so much more out there. Yeah. So my inner practice is always like, what else can we connect with? But then it's also the practice of how do we embody that? Because I mean, yes, you can connect with all these different beings and realms and, have all that awareness. But at the end of the day, it's what does that do for us as humans? Am I becoming a better person because of it? Is the guidance that I'm receiving helping me to become a better person? Am I able to be more self-aware and be kinder to human beings? Or that's what it comes down to. I mean, all of this awakening and all of this process, at the end of it, it's about bringing it back home into the heart, becoming a better human being, and then also sending that energy to the earth, because it's our connection with the earth that's going to help the evolution in the biggest way. So there is a really grounded element to all of this as well, which is, how can I utilize my connections to make the world a better place? Can I receive guidance on how to build a business? Can I receive guidance on how to manifest more abundance? Can I receive guidance on how to heal myself? Like, those are all the things that, after connecting with all these different races, it's what piece are we bringing back to earth, and how are we integrating that knowledge and wisdom for the betterment of our society and for our planet?
And how do you think we're going to be doing that, over time? How are we going to integrate that knowledge to make sure that we have a better planet?
Well, there's a couple of ways we can do that. First and foremost, it's the self-awareness piece, which is that as we expand our consciousness, we do our best to be the best human being. I'm not perfect. I don't know if anyone is. Maybe Buddha, I think, got there at some point. Yep. But it's an evolution, right? And so, like, I can give you, an example. Like, sometimes if I get frustrated with something, maybe something in my day is just not going right, sometimes I will then just drop into my inner heart space and I'll connect with my guides, and they give me very sensible advice to move through whatever is happening. So sometimes it's that guidance piece that comes in. Other times it could be like more looking at that bigger picture and that bigger vision. Like, as we're moving towards this peaceful open contact, where are we going as a society? Where are the stuck points that humanity has, and what can I do? What can I contribute to change that? So it could be, for example, running a course or a program that's going to teach people, that's going to be aligned with my soul, that's going to help as many people as possible, while also being financially viable in the 3D sense of things as well. So it's that integration piece of, how do we take this really expansive knowledge, and then what do we do with that here? Are we cleaning up the oceans? Are we growing more trees? Are we changing our governance systems? Can we maybe learn from the political systems of other races? Can we maybe take on board some of their healing technologies and their tools and practices that they use? Because all of those things can shift entire industries if we allow it to.
And also, I think we've kind of mentioned that, you were studying science as well, and especially the medical model of how we look at things. Do you find that kind of clashes with, your work as well? And that is a struggle for you to be able to, get these realms together into the human world, is that clash of, science.
It doesn't really clash. It depends how you look at it. I just see science, and this is like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
We're all seeking the truth. We're all seeking to find the answers, and we all want to know how creation works, right? And the way that I've discovered that, I guess, really it comes from my science inquisitive mind, is I wanted to know how the world works. That's why I did science, Only thing is, for me, science didn't really have all the answers. And then when I started meditating, I discovered things about the world that felt more meaningful to me. But at the end of the day, I feel like it all comes back full circle, because science is the exploration of the way the world works, and consciousness is a really big piece of that. You can't ignore that. So I think if science and consciousness and spirituality and all these fields actually start working together, I think we can find a solution for humanity that's going to be much more harmonious. The only problem with that is, even just going back to, the medical space, there are companies out there whose best interest is profit over healing. So when you have agendas like that in place, it makes it difficult to really do what's best for all of humanity. Now, I'm not anti anything. It's just like, let's take a look at what's really going on and who's really benefiting from all of this. One of the early models I learned in critical thinking is who benefits, who pays, right? So who benefits and who pays the price. And if everybody was healed, who would benefit and who would pay the price? And if everybody stayed unhealthy, who would benefit and who would pay the price? You just have to think about that a little bit to get some answers, right? So it's looking at, are we really doing what is for humanity, like best for humanity as a whole, or are we all still putting our personal agendas into the mix? Are we coming from a place of fear, or are we coming from a place of love and harmony? And what can we do to shift that? And I think it starts with having these sorts of conversations, but also doing the inner work, like going into your own meditations, going into your own space, and really discovering that truth for ourselves.
What would you say to someone who has sort of these feelings, or has sort of these, visions or things that they have? How would you, tell someone to start their journey, or, speak to you?
Well, I would say go to my website, www.eeshapatel.com. That's EESHAPATEL.com. And just go check out my resources tab. I've got amazing interviews. If you send me a message on Facebook, Instagram, or email, I'll be happy to send you a free copy of my 4 foundation daily practices. This is the first step in learning how to access the inner heart. So the meditation that I learned, step 1, I give away for free. So everyone can have that, and then you can do that every single day. You can open up your heart energy. You can also go check out my podcast, First Contact, which I have these amazing guests and interviews. And then when you're ready to go to that next level, come and join our Galactic community, where I can teach you how to make contact and how to access this world for yourself.
And with the Galactic community, how have you built that? Because obviously you started from the ground up. How have you kind of built your empire? How did that work?
I actually started off with a brick and mortar business right here in Perth.
Yep.
So in Wangara, I had a studio for 5 years, and every single night on a Friday, we used to get together and do Friday night meditation. It became extremely popular. All my friends knew not to bother inviting me out on Fridays anymore, because I was never available. So all I wanted to do every Friday was meditate. And the thing is, meditation was great, but people, they used to stick around till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, having all these amazing conversations. So even after the meditation was finished, they'd all hang back. And I thought, well, we need a space where people can actually explore this other stuff. So that's when I started a series of other workshops. And once a month, I used to do different topics. So for example, we talk about the planetary grid lines, or we talk about the galactic beings, or we talk about healing, or they're all these different topics. And so over the years, I just gathered this pile of things that wisdom that I either knew or that I channeled, or things that people had taught me, or even just topics that people were curious about. And if I was able to help and guide people in that, I would create these activations or workshops to help them. Now, during COVID, everything kind of changed because, first of all, my studio was the first to shut down. But also then I left Perth and I went over to the East Coast for a couple of years. And so I took my whole business online, and that's when we started the community. And so it's been running for about 4 years now. It's evolved and changed in that time. But what we have now is it's a monthly membership that you can join, and there's all these different activations in there. There's processes. You learn the inner heart meditation in there as well. And you have a community and a tribe where we're all learning and evolving and growing together. So it's really the perfect place for people to come in if they want to experience this and they want to evolve themselves in their consciousness. All they have to do is join the community, go through the modules step by step by step, learn all these different topics, and do it in a really guided, safe, and supported way within the community.
Yeah, and we will put up your website as well when this is released, so people can check that out as well. Now, when in the future, 5 years from now, I'm going to teleport 5 years from now. How would you like First Contact to have shifted from now until then?
5 years from now, I well and truly hope that First Contact has happened.
Yeah.
At a global, political, governmental level. We are setting the vision for 2027. That goalpost has changed. And, a lot of people ask me why 2027? Well, it really comes down to the vision that we choose for ourselves. Because the thing is, they will make contact when we're ready for it. They're not the ones holding anything back. It's us,
Yeah.
So when we choose it and we, go in a very loving way, and we're not going to shoot them down, that's important. But really, when we open ourselves to that contact, they'll be more than willing to show up and communicate with us. So I really hope that 5 years from now, we're talking in 2030, that official contact has happened. But even, if the government is still playing its little games or whatever at that point in time, I just hope that more and more people out there are going to just have their contact anyway. Yeah. Because the biggest philosophy that we have at First Contact is your first contact. Don't rely on the government. Don't rely on anyone else. You go out into your backyard, you look up at the night sky, and you make contact. And so 5 years from now, I hope that the movement has accelerated to such a point where it becomes an everyday norm for people to do that.
And with the government or the powers to be, stepping in, how frustrating is that for you?
I don't get overly frustrated by it, and in my paradigm, the government's not that powerful. You know who is powerful? You and I.
Yep.
Because if every single one of us went out in our backyards, opened our hearts, and connected with the beings, there's nothing they could do about it.
Yep.
So, we place all this power on the government, but really, it's just we're forgetting our own power, and the power that we have is in our own consciousness. Every day, I can choose to put on my headphones, do my 4 foundation practices. I can drop into my inner heart, and I can connect. Nothing is stopping me from doing that.
Yep.
I mean, the only thing that gets in your own way then is, people who say, well, I don't have time, I don't have this, I don't want to, whatever. But the reality is you can do this right now. You can do this today. Your first contact can be this evening. So it's just a case of deciding it, choosing it, and not putting the power in the government, but taking it back into our hands, because that is what First Contact's all about.
Okay, and you've also got, you've already mentioned that you've got a podcast, First Contact, which I have listened to a few episodes. What made you decide to start that? Was that another way of educating people on a broader level?
I started First Contact on guidance of Ashtar and the Galactic Federation. And it was to do with a timeline shift and change that happened around 2020, 2021.
Yep.
And basically, the disclosure timeline got accelerated in order to shift the way that the Earth's evolution was going to happen. It's a much longer story that I talk about in detail in other podcasts,
Yep.
but I'll give you the very short version of that here, which is that timelines can change sometimes, and as a result of that, corrections can also happen. And there are galactic races who support in these corrections when they need to shift the way that things happen. So basically, when everything changed in 2020, which we were all there for, they said that disclosure needed to be accelerated, and they said that for me, they wanted me to switch gears a little bit, move out of the healing space, which I was in for many years, because I was a spiritual healer, right? That was my theme. I went from being a healer into stepping up more into my galactic ambassador role now, which is I'm directly helping people make contact on a day-to-day basis, and that's to do with the bigger picture vision of that open contact by 2027, which we're working towards.
And when you talk to people, you get them to, contact, and you get them. What are their main things that they get out of it? What are the benefits for them that they see?
It depends on where people are at in their consciousness. I mean, if you're really, if someone comes in and they look at it from the perspective of what do I get out of it? Well, I mean, yeah, you'll probably get healing, you'll probably get abundance, you'll probably get, connection, self-awareness, all those things. But really the question that we need to be asking is, what do we get out of it as a human race? And I think that's where my vision's at now. It's much more collectively focused and looking at if I choose this at a personal level, how does that benefit everyone else? If you choose this at a personal level, how does that benefit everyone else? Because I can't do the global awakening alone, and I wouldn't want to. I mean, I'm here with all of my fellow buddies on planet Earth. There's almost, 8 billion of us now or something. So it's up to each and every one of us, and when each of us decide within ourselves, the benefits it's like the cherry on top, Like when I connected to my guides and I started following my life purpose, I did get a lot of benefits in my personal life. I mean, I manifested house, car, partner, money, everything, but I didn't do it for that reason. I did it because I wanted to just be in my service to humanity. And then we talk about this concept called providence, where in order for me to do my best work, to really show up every day and do all these free interviews and, do all of that, well, I need to have my bills paid. I need to have my house sorted. I need to have, everything in order. And so those things, it's like it happened fairly easily, because those were the things that were going to support me living this life where I can be of highest service. So that's really the frame that I come from, is if you're living your best life and you're living your purpose, let the universe provide the things to make that happen.
And now, I know you speak all around, not just Australia, but internationally as well. Mm-hmm. Do you find people's attitudes are different in other countries? Towards?
Some countries I have found a greater level of openness than others.
Yep.
The US is absolutely popping when it comes to the disclosure side of things, and I mean, they have really massive conferences. Like, for example, I was at Contact in the Desert earlier this year. About 2,000 plus people attended that. Really big name speakers. Yep. Whereas I find here in Australia, it's like we're still kind of like catching up a little bit, and we don't have a lot of activity. There's not a lot of spaces where people can go. There's not a lot of leaders in this space. So, and then, in Europe, there are pockets where there's quite a bit of activity going on. So I think, some spaces are more sort of further ahead when it comes to the whole cosmic disclosure side of things, and even the awakening side of things. But that's not to say that there aren't people everywhere who are experiencing this, because there are plenty of people here in Perth who are having galactic experiences, who just don't have anywhere to go right now because there aren't as many meetups and stuff like that as what you have in some of these other places.
Yep. And that's something that you'd like to maybe foster, maybe more of those sort of meetups, in Perth and other states?
So I had solely Perth-based focus for 5 years. So I feel like I've done that.
Yeah.
And I held events in Perth. We get, at least 100 people showing up in person to these events. And so I feel like I kind of did that. And then when my work went more global, it became challenging for me to hold in-person stuff, because even right now, like for example, in November, we've got the 11/11 Gateway event coming up. It's a free online global event, and we've got 500 people coming to this thing so far, but probably more by the time this bit gets aired. So, I can't do that in one location. So at the moment, I feel like being more in the global online space allows me to have a greater level of impact. In saying that, though, I do see us having maybe some more meetups in the new year. And actually, we've got one coming up in December, because one of our community members is flying all the way from Denmark and he's coming to Australia. So we're doing a community meetup here in Perth. But there's only like a handful of our community that live in Perth.
Yep.
So, I would love to, but I think at the moment it's just... it's hard to get everyone in one space. And I think it would be more likely if I held a retreat. Like, for example, next year, I want to do a retreat in Sedona. I think I'm more likely to get a larger audience there than if I had something here in Perth.
Yeah. So, it's also about marketing as well.
A little bit, yeah.
Now, a couple more questions before we finish up. With Galactic, your Galactic community, what are things that you've learnt from them? Yeah, what are some of the more
Like from the members?
Yeah, from the members, yeah.
Oh, I learn from them all the time. One of the biggest things is just, whenever they have those different galactic connections, they come through for me, for them.
Yep.
So then I'll be meeting new races or new beings because of their connection. So that's always a beautiful thing to have. But also just the process of hosting and nurturing a community is an area that I've grown in quite a lot, and it's, like taking on board their feedback and what they want and how I can best support them, I think is always an area of learning and growth as well. So even though I'm teaching them how to access their galactic guides, I'm always learning from the community as well, because there's that feedback that comes to me as well in terms of how I can be a better mentor, a better teacher, so that then I can go out and do my work in a better way as well.
Yeah, I know in the human world, we have different races and species and, different, things like that. And, sometimes we all don't get along. We have wars and things like that, and they've been carrying on for, thousands of years. Consider Palestine, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, and all that. Now, in the world realms, are there any species that kind of clash together?
In the galactic worlds, there are some that are still figuring that out. There are wars. There have been plenty of wars in our galactic history. So again, it's coming back to that idea of evolution that I said before. Like, we have so much diversity here and there's so much diversity there. And the work isn't just about peace on Earth, it's intergalactic. So, sometimes it feels like maybe we should get ourselves sorted before we even think about going to the stars, you know. But at the same time, I think that we can learn from each other, and they learn from us too. Like, there's a lot that they learn from the Earth experience, because we have experiences here on Earth that other galactic races don't have. So again, it's that two-way street of learning between us. And we're all just evolving. We're all trying to do our best. I don't think anyone's necessarily bad. I just think that, there's a space for love and compassion, and there's a space for understanding. And if we can accept our differences, whether that's between humans or between galactic races, I think we'll all be better for it.
Excellent. Well, Eesha, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a really fascinating interview.
All right. Thank you very much.
Cheers.